All right, well, I guess we'll start out with Reuters. The U.S. Southern Poverty Law Center charged with fraud over use of paid informants. I lost my cursor. Oh. Washington, April 21st, from Reuters. The Trump administration obtained a criminal indictment on Tuesday charging the Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC, a civil rights group that tracks political extremists, with defrauding its own donors by using paid informants to infiltrate far right organizations. The 11-count indictment, returned by a federal grand jury in Alabama, levels charges of wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering against the SPLC as an organization. No individuals or other entities were named as defendants. The 55-year-old law center, which had long shared information it's collected with the FBI and other law enforcement groups before the Trump administration cut ties with SPLC 6 months ago, decried the charges as false allegations. Quote, taking on violent hate and extremist groups is among the most dangerous work there is, and we believe it is also among the most important work we do, unquote, the organization's interim CEO and president, Brighton Fair, said in a statement. He said the SPLC was reviewing the 14-page indictment, but added that its program of paid informants has, quote, saved lives, unquote, announcing the indictment of a news conference announcing the indictment at a news conference. Acting U.S. Attorney General Todd Blanche accused the SPLC of manufacturing the extremism it purports to oppose by paying sources to stoke racial hatred. Yeah, yeah. The criminal charges stem from fraud. The criminal charges stem from fraud, and the indictment said the nonprofit law center committed by covertly funneling more than $3 million from donors to the members of hate groups, including the Ku Klux Klan and neo-Nazi organizations between 2014 and 2023. According to the indictment, the payments amounted to fraud because the SPLC opened bank accounts connected to fake entities to disguise the source of the payments and deceive donors by soliciting contributions under false pretenses. In a short statement released hours before the charges were announced, Fair defended the use of paid informants to collect information, a practice the FBI says it uses in its own investigations as necessary to protect SPLC staff from potential violence. Fair said his organization has refrained from widely publicizing such methods in order to protect the informants themselves and their families. Amy Justice, Drummond Station. Kash Patel in October ended a year-long working relationship between his agency and the SPLC, calling the group a, quote, partisan smear machine, unquote, that had been used to defame people and inspire violence. Patel's actions came weeks after the assassination of right-wing activist Charlie Kirk, whose conservative youth organization, Turning Point USA, has included in SPLC's, quote, hate map, unquote, and described as an anti-government group. The Trump administration has launched a multi-pronged effort to investigate the activities and funding streams of liberal or left-wing organizations it accuses of promoting violence or espousing views it defines as domestic terrorism. Okay, so that's the story there. While this is primarily a economics and business finance channel, I do want to go a little bit into now. No, it's just an indictment, but for the sake of the argument, we're going to pretend it's true. We're going to pretend that they're paying their hate group. Not right. So they said paying the groups for information, but I've heard chit chat on the internet stating that they're giving them, which if you could twist it, if you wanted to twist it, you could, into like we're giving them money to promote their stuff, like funding their extremism, which could go to violence or whatever, neo-Nazi groups, but things you see on the internet for sure. But we're again going to say that it's true, and that's what they're using the money for, besides just information. Because I have a bunch of notes on fraud that I would like to go through. So the first one, fraud and abuse are not unique to corporations or governments. They have historically occurred in nonprofit charities and international agencies as well, because these organizations often lack the same, quote, profit and loss pressures that force private firms to be efficient and transparent to survive. They can sometimes be susceptible to mismanagement. Again, that note's basically for the you could always say like, okay, they're paying the information. Well, we're still giving them money, for their to print their T-shirts, print their coned hats. You know, you could put it that way. And I know they said the FBI. Well, a counterpoint I have for them is like they said oh, the FBI does that. They pay they pay their informants. So it's like, well, usually the FBI is doing that too because they're going to be arresting the people, or the information is so good that it would lead to criminal charges. This is not a criminal investigation group. It's the poverty law center. It's used to just sorry, like it's to go to cases, but they're not in charge of law enforcement. So there's that. You could twist it that way, and I need more evidence of it. And again, this is just an indictment. Um, Nonprofit organizations that depend on a steady stream of donations from the public often have incentives to be alarmist. This tactic is somewhat used to, quote, scare more money out of donors, unquote, by emphasizing or exaggerating threats, which ensure the continued flow of capital to the organization. This is the part I mainly wanted to get into. So, I don't have a problem, like you get charities, donations, and stuff for sure. But one, I think those even to an extent, like there's some corruption within those for sure, because 100% of the money you're donating is not going back to those charities. I've heard statistics that it's 10 to 20% is actually going back to them because they gotta feed their own people or whatever. Fair, fine, whatever. But it's like this has been brought up to me before, but it's like if you say you need funding to get rid of the problem, and then you get rid of the problem, then that's it. You get no more stream of income because the problem's gone. So now, granted, we are pretending this is true, that it's not just for paid informants, it's for we're funding them so that there is a problem, which to an extent I can see. It's again, we're not a very political channel, but it's like we need these groups to be active for us to receive the payment. Now, again, if we're going off random statistics you can find on the internet, 10 to 20% of what you're donating is getting back to them. So that means 80% of what you're giving them is not going to charities. It's going to the big wigs, the corporations, and the employees. You need to pay them so they can actually go out and accept your donations. If the problem's gone, there's 80% of your income. And that's not unusual. Because, for example, like we know capitalism. We talk about incentives. There needs to be incentive for a company to be like, hey, we need your money for this. And one example I bring up is like environmental activism. I don't have a problem with that. I'm very pro Earth. I'm not a tree hugger by any means, but we can lessen the pollution. I'm fine with that. But they talk about like, oh, they're chopping out rainforests and they're chopping this, that, and the other to make way forever. But my counter to that is, do you know what company in the world plants the most trees?
Is it the forest company?
Oh yeah, it's well, kind of. They're kind of a forest company. It's the paper making companies.
Yeah.
Because if they understand that if they chop down all the trees, they in the future they will have no product. They will not be able to make paper. So the people who plant the most trees are the people who are incentivized to use those trees. So
Hmm.
so it's kind of like, and to an extent, you're not hearing paper companies sending out their low level employees to accept donations so they can plant and chop down more trees. They already know this. A portion of their revenue goes to planting more trees. They plant more trees than anybody else in the world. You don't hear a lot of that coming from what's it called? For lack of a better term, the Tree Hugger Corporation,
Hmm.
because 20% of all of their products is what actually going to the the donation. And even then, I'd say it's broken up even further to pay more employees. Probably actually about 5% of what you pay is actually getting to stuff like that. Now, I'm sure there's, you know, I have other reserves for different types of charities and whatnot, but it's besides the point. Essentially, if there's no threat out there, then there's nothing to campaign on, and they've lost their revenue. Um, let's see. Unlike a private firm that must provide a product consumers want to stay solvent, aka like the paper making companies, a nonprofit's quote output unquote is often the precipitation of advocacy or crisis management. If a problem were perceived as solved or manageable, the financial incentive for the organization to exist might diminish. Yep, I just stated that with my example. Large sums of money can sometimes enable existing politicians to enrich themselves through graft and dispense funds in, quote, politically strategic ways, quote, unquote, to maintain their power. While this specific example refers to international aid, no, sorry, I just copied that from my notes. It illustrates the broader economic range of large, centralized pools of money being diverted from their stated purpose. If we want to go into it, we can, but I've got no problem saying that politicians have a problem with accepting donations and they're not going to where they want to say they go. AKA government's corrupt. What are you going to do? And if government's corrupt, you can absolutely assume these type of organizations are also corrupt. But it is what it is. Again, we're going off it's true. It's just indictments. We're just saying that, oh, the money would, like, I think it was, they're specifically, like, what's it called? Like, they're using the money to promote, hate stuff. That way there's something to campaign on. Fund conspiracy. And to an extent, I would, throw some coin into that hat. But we'll see how far that goes. Any thoughts?
I kind of have two thoughts.
Fair.
Well, three. We'll start with the third one. Is it funnier and more in line with their mission statement if the KKK were to use whatever SPLU money they may or may not be getting to buy little hoods from China or from Zimbabwe?
Probably China if I really had to guess.
So that was the third thought. I was like, man, what if you imagine being a KKK guy and you're putting on your gear and you see a little tag and it's like, made in Zimbabwe. And you're like, God damn it. No, this. You turn to your black KKK friend and you're like, this is ridiculous.
It's like that Dave Chappelle skit.
Yeah. But, there's that, and then there's given the current political climate, I wouldn't be surprised if this was like politicized litigation. So that was sort of the first thing. Was like, whenever I see stuff like this, especially when it involves the SPLC, it's like it's probably gonna be pretty politicized on both sides. But as far as it goes with like potential fraud, I mean, wait to see where the case ends up. I don't think that like the system is so bad, at least in the judiciary, that like we're likely to see some like ultra politicized case be followed through all the way. I imagine like the initial litigation could be politicized, where it's like, oh, we're gonna charge you with this. And it's like, okay, but then prove it. And they're like, oh, we're just gonna drag this out for like 15 months, and then no one will remember, and we'll drop the case, and it will make headlines.
Yeah, just in time for the headlines.
So it's potential
midterms.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And then there's the other side where it's like, I mean, hey, if they are doing this stuff, I mean, absolutely. But yeah, on the point of like needing to keep business open, potentially funding these groups, if I had to put a number to it, I feel like that's maybe, if I had to give it a percentage, I feel like 7. No, that's. I feel like I was gonna say 17%, but like I could see as high as like 25. Like, this is maybe a 1 in 4 chance that this is happening, because this is basically, it would basically just be similar to what happened with the whole BLM thing, where the organization that ran that was basically just turbo fraud. Like, it was bad.
Yeah, I heard like the leader of it. Now, granted, I've heard that the BLM during the 2020 George Floyd riots, that the BLM, no, I didn't go too far into it, but that specific BLM group that was getting all the donations, is not the original. It's one that is one that
Ah,
popped up and took the name because the original was Black Lives Matter, and I only say that because again, according to the internet, take it with a grain of salt, but the original organization was called Black Lives Matter, and the guy leading in charge of it is like he's very not anti-cop. Like he's very much so.
yeah.
We need more of our
Well,
more of our
which is in
impoverished.
line with which is well, that's in line with a lot of the positions of people who supported the crime bill back in the 90s under the, I believe, the Clinton administration, where it was the, I think it was like the College of African, it was the, what is it, NCAA?
Yeah, NCAA. Yeah.
National College of African American something. National College of African Americans. Basically, all the black people in Congress were actually hugely in support of it. And if you get to sort of those like big policy wonks in and not just like pundits and talking heads, if you get to like the big policy wonks in the African American advocacy groups, a lot of them are like pretty pro policing and pro law enforcement. Um, at least in comparison to their more well known
Yeah.
like punditry counterparts. Um,
Yeah. So I bring that
but
up
yeah, like
because yeah. Sorry. Continue.
the only reason it's as high as 25 is because just how insane the political environment is right now. If you told me
Oh
about this
yeah.
like 5 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have been like, meh. I put that at, like a less than 1% chance likelihood. That seems like it's like one of those things where it's like it's similar to like a bill that they'll put out where it's like, oh, we want to you know force everyone to we want to force everyone to switch to only eating tofu to save the environment, and you call it the Save the Environment bill. And so just so you can put out there the headline that X many senators voted against the Save the Environment bill,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, well, this was clearly just for headlines. Or uh, insert, senator calls for, or some state has filed some court proceeding against SpaceX or something like that, because it's really what you really want is a big political jab that people are reading the headline, and then nothing comes of it, and then you move on with your lives.
Mhm.
That's kind of like, I know this is a little off topic, but it's kind of like the old sort of way that the U.S. and Israel and Iran and Jordan and all those countries used to handle like conflicts, until the Israelis decided they actually wanted something, which would be like they would go, someone would throw a bomb to be like, hey, just so you know, we're not friends, and screw you, we don't like you, and then it would get blocked by like the Iron Dome or whatever, and then to sort of save face and to you know return justice, they would bomb some like middle of nowhere village that was totally empty of people, that they knew was going to be empty of people, to like hurt their infrastructure because that village produced, like, it had like an oil refinery. So you could be like, well, we retaliated, and now we're in peace talks, right? So everyone, we've got our sort of ceremonial tit for tat, and then we all move on with our lives, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of have that at like the lawfare level, whereas like you do these sort of like political tit for tats. You know that they're not serious. They know that they're not serious. They're just doing it to get headlines. You know that you're going to do the same thing in like 2 months to get a headline. And everyone in the game kind of knows they're playing it, but the point of the theater is to convince everyone in the audience. So like,
Yeah. Convince people who just scroll on Facebook, see the headline, move on with their
exactly,
life.
right? People who aren't involved, which would then affect funding down, down the line and whatnot. So like the consequences are real and will affect you, but you know that the thing they're trying to hit you with isn't the actual lawsuit. It's the social consequences of the headline that will come from the naming of the lawsuit.
Yeah.
So if I had to put money on it, I feel like that's probably what this is. Now it could come out to be the case that, hey, it might be the case that they, secretly funneled more than $3 million in donation funds to people who are associated with violent extremist groups. And it's like, I mean, maybe that might be the case, but like, you know, if I was running an organization that was like, hey, our job is to, go after and sue these groups to accomplish our mission. I mean, I could see
Yeah, I could
situations in
see
which
it.
money,
Yeah.
well, not even, I mean, maybe a little bit of tit for tat, but I was gonna say, like, I could see situation, like, pretty reasonable situations where it's like, yeah, I could see how my money could end up in their pockets. In the same way, I could see how, like, American guns and weapons and funds and whatnot could end up in the hands of, like, mujahideen and stuff, where it's like, because you're at odds, I feel like the opportunity for crossbreeds is a lot higher, and even potentially like intentional like sting operations where it's like, yeah, I'm going to give you X much money because I know, like, I need the paper trail, right? And if I can get a financial injection, I get you to accept it, that builds me a paper trail, right? This is sort of like your FBI style, CIA style, where it's like, I don't actually want you to do anything. I'm trying to set you up to do something stupid and relatively harmless, or catch you in the act of doing it, because I now have information. I now have insiders. I now have, contacts in your group who maybe they're really, like, actually parts of your group. Like, I am giving actual people who are actual full-on members of your group this stuff under false pretenses because they don't know who I am, right?
Yeah.
Like, this isn't there's not a mole. There's just a guy I have convinced I am not who I am. So I am playing the mole, but I'm not in the group. I'm just sort of moling from outside. So it could be that. I don't know. Maybe wait the case comes out. We'll see. This is one of those things where it's just like, you know what? Maybe it could be the case that they're totally like, hate curves are going down. We need to keep those numbers up so we can stick around. But it could also be the case that they're like, it's just when you do the full investigation and like they just will be able to produce. They might be able to just produce, be like, yeah, no, we did this for this reason and this and this and this and that netted us here and here, and this is all above board, totally legal, no conflict of interest because of our goals and our specific execution of the task was all within, like the rules, and we're all good. So who knows?
Yeah,
and plus, this is from.
By the time else I'll figure it out, it's like it's been months. It's past headlines. Y'all done it, forgot about it. I done it, forgot about it.
Right. The actual secret one here is, so I'm reading over the DOJ official, like, public affairs thing.
Yeah.
The quote, the SPLC is manufacturing racism to justify its existence, said acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. I think he's just trying to legitimize his presence.
Maybe.
I think he's running for the role. He's like, how do I know, I'll go to the SPLC. If I could do that, maybe they'll give me the job.
Yeah, midterms coming up. I'm keep pointing out midterms coming up, and it's very political. Yep. And I think if I remember correctly, this was from like last week, but like Republicans are on the back foot right now when it comes to.
Yeah.
So maybe.
Yep.
I don't know. Not granted.
Which we will get to later.
Oh yeah, we will. But yeah.
So, I'm reading through the article a little bit more. FBI Director Kash Patel is in here.
Oh yeah.
Which I think further legitimizes my theory that this is a political point. Let's keep their jobs. Dude, did you? So.
Oh yeah, I just
the
saw
day this is.
Sorry, you continue.
For the audience, the day this is being recorded is the day after. No. So the day this is being recorded is the day after. I might be actually. I don't know what specific call sheet thing you're talking about. The day this is being recorded is the day after the attempted shooting at the White House. Something. What is it? It's not the inaugural dinner. What are they called?
It was like some conference dinner. It's at some hotel.
Yes. So some like big informational conference just occurred, and there was an attempted shooting at it. And the guy who did it, Cole Allen, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
Published a manifesto, and in that manifesto, he directly excludes FBI Director Kash Patel as a person of interest in his attempt to take down the regime.
He ain't that important.
With literally in his manifesto, something to the tune of, with the exception of Mr. Kash Patel. Like, man, that dude just cannot catch a break. Oh, and then even worse, his girlfriend was found with some other guy in a supply closet, quote, holding hands or something. He just cannot catch a break. So the fact that he's in this, and I know this is like about a week or so old.
Yeah.
This dude's job has always been a bit tenuous, so this might be he might be hopping on this to try to be like, look at me, I can do something useful and legitimate. Guys, look. But that's what I'll have to say about this article.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. We'll see where it goes, and I mean something might come out of it, but based on
Mm.
history with this administration, I'm not sure, especially with midterms coming up. But with our next one, we've got more oil because we're all not tired of hearing about that. The Fed's Waller strikes a cautious tone on rate cuts amid oil shock. Federal Reserve get out of here. Federal Reserve Governor Chris Waller said Friday that whether or not the Iran war ends soon, he's cautious about cutting interest rates right now. Waller stressed that he's aware that consumers and businesses are experiencing a jolt from higher energy prices right after tariffs pushed up inflation over the past year. They will be, quote, cautious, unquote, he said when looking at what he called this sequence of, quote, transitory shocks, unquote. Quote, while intellectually it makes sense to look through each shock with a sequence of shocks, policymakers need to be more vigilant, unquote. Duh. Waller said in a speech in Alabama, quote, if the shocks hit one after another, they will keep inflation elevated for quite some time, unquote, Waller said. Quote, the standard, half quote, look through, half quote, can become problematic if businesses and households start to believe inflation is persistently higher and it affects their price and wage setting behavior, unquote. Waller said that while consumers have mostly shrugged off the effects of tariffs in their spending and made do with some higher energy prices, that dude's rich. He doesn't know anything about us. There is likely a threshold at which consumers start to pull back on spending, which could impact hiring. We're already there. I guess I saw something about like last month we gained like 100,000 jobs, but everything's still high. Waller warned that the longer the conflict continues, the more closely he'll watch payrolls and the unemployment rate for signs of weakening in the job market. Waller noted that if the Strait of Hormuz opens and trade flows return somewhat to normal, he could look through the effect of recent higher energy prices on inflation and focus more on the job in the market. Inflation regarding energy and oil is sticky. We'll get into that, but that would leave him cautious about rate cuts now and more inclined toward cuts to support the labor market later this year if the outlook is steadier. But Waller said that the longer energy prices remain elevated, the greater the chances that higher inflation becomes embedded across a variety of goods and services. It's already here, and it kind of stays. Supply chain. That wasn't in the article. Supply chains effects could emerge, and the economy and employment could start to slow. That would mean the Fed would face higher inflation and a weaker job market. This situation, Waller said, in this situation, Waller said he'd have to look at both sides, and that may mean holding rates steady if inflation turns out to be a bigger risk than a drop in job growth. Elsewhere on Friday, San Francisco Fed President Mary Daly said interest rates are in a, quote, very good place, unquote, and, quote, slightly restrictive, unquote. She said the path for rates depends on how long the Middle East conflict lasts. The Fed could leave rates where they are, which would still hold back inflation. But if inflation were to take off, which is not her base chance, then the Fed could raise interest rates. If the conflict ends quickly and prices fall, the Fed could return to its previous path to cuts. Okay, so keep in mind, this is the Fed. I don't work for the Fed. Mainly because they won't accept my application that I haven't sent in. But they talk about like what's called the inflation because of oil shocks. Sorry, the oil crisis for sure. And the problem, which I'm surprised they pointed out, when it comes to inflation, it goes up and down for sure. But when it comes to inflation caused by an energy crisis, such as oil, uh, gas, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to call it, it's sticky. Meaning that oil problem, your prices go up because of inflation. Let's say the oil problem goes away. Inflation is not dropping at the same rate. It's dropping at a significantly lower rate because one, I state it all the time, and I state it all the time in this channel. Money loves certainty, and if something's not certain, things remain high and volatile. That's why you keep seeing green and red all over X and wherever you check your stocks, go up and down because it's uncertain. Just because the oil crisis has gone away, that doesn't mean that these inflationary fears have also gone away. In fact, if anything, it's probably more intense because now we're going back and forth. But we'll get to more of that later. From my notes, an oil shock functions as a supply shock, which simultaneously pushes prices up while slowing down the real economy, leaving central bankers with no way to mitigate both, quote, ills at once. Because demand for energy is highly inelastic in the short run, higher oil prices act as a direct tax that reduces the real income of citizens. This is a form of cost push inflation, where external forces independent of the Fed push up production costs. Once a supply shock pushes core inflation higher, it tends to, quote, drift back only very slowly, unquote, due to inertia in the inflation process. Yeah, I just stated that. So it's kind of like the whole, they shut the Strait of Hormuz down, your gas prices went up. Well, then it was open for a bit. Your gas prices didn't fall back down to even even in between the before the shutting down. We've heard reports that Venezuela's up, and a bunch of I think like 80,000 oil tankers made their way to Texas to buy American oil, while the Strait of Hormuz had their two tolls, for lack of a better word, that I can think of. Your gas prices didn't go down. Like, okay, I'll admit they've dropped like 5 cents for me where I'm at, but that doesn't seem
Yeah.
comparable to essentially the $1.20 it jumped up, which
Yeah.
sucks.
Well, here's the scariest part about all of this inflation talk around gas is that as much as it's gone up, it still hasn't hit. This is all like perspective. You can look at the the oil, what was it, embargo of 1973 didn't actually hit prices and spending habits until 1974. I believe it was around 8 to 10 months after.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so here's the deal, right? As bad as you think this is now, actually a lot of this is being, one, cushioned by delayed effects, and then two, this is additionally being cushioned by government subsidies on a lot of this. A lot of the price of oil right now in the United States is getting heavily, heavily subsidized in order to ensure that like we're not getting this enormous shock all at once. But unfortunately, the bullwhip effects, for those who are, and the bullwhip is, for those who are unfamiliar, this idea in like supply chain management that small changes at one end of the supply chain can end up as huge changes at the other end, right? So a small delay at the beginning can end up as a huge delay at the end.
Like a butterfly
Let's
effect.
say
Yeah.
it takes, five, let's say it takes like, an additional day for a product to get where it needs to go. Well, that means, especially if you're running like just-in-time inventories, like most places are, that means everything else shuts down a little bit, and everything else gets delayed by a little bit more and a little bit more. So the next thing has to wait 2 days because now the products are desynced. And the next thing after that has to wait 5 days because the products are desynced. The next thing after that has to wait 15 days because they're, more and more things get more and more desynced as time goes on. So it makes it harder to manage. And then kicking everything back up to normal speed requires getting everything back on the same timing, getting everything back on the same schedule, which is also very difficult because some places are experiencing, you either have too much on hand, so you're, storing, like you need to use up what you have before you can buy more, which means that, the producer, which is relying on your paychecks, is now, having other problems. Like, it's this huge, huge problem for like supply chain stuff. And we experienced a lot of this with like the chip shortage during COVID. The car market still has not recovered, new or used. It still has not recovered from the computer chip shortage all the way back in the beginning of 2020, March of 2020, and we still have not recovered 6 years later. I believe we're like 6 years and like 2 weeks or something. Like the shutdown was
Like near the end of March-ish.
yeah, near the end of
Yeah.
March. Like 6 years later, we're still not back. We're still not better. It's still a nightmare. And this oil embargo, not embargo, this oil, this blocking the Strait of Hormuz is, I believe, there's like 5 times greater supply chain shutdown compared to the embargo. Like this is 5 times bigger than the oil embargo that completely changed the auto industry. So like, brace yourselves. This could get gnarly, like
Mm-hmm.
phenomenally bad. Like you could be living in the middle of rural nowhere and watch your gas over like the course of 2 months go from, four,
Yeah,
five
especially
dollars a
$4 now.
gallon
Yeah.
to 10. Like not as a joke, not as a hyperbole, like legitimately rural nowhere, $10 a gallon. Not to mention big cities that are car dependent and whatnot. Like, and that's just cars. That's not including power production. That's not including clothing, which is also used making which is also used which also uses like polymers, like oil-based polymers, to be made because that's what most plastic is. It's oil-based polymer. So clothing could skyrocket. Or like the cost of clothes could skyrocket. The cost of energy could skyrocket. Groceries will probably go up in cost because they have to be transported, and the transport has to be paid for. And the transport just got like an order of magnitude more expensive to move around. Additional to that, you might see air travel basically shut off for like a very or like reduce in scale by like multiple orders of magnitude. Like I would be surprised if we make it out with more than like two airlines surviving in the United States. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to doom and gloom here, but like this is this is really 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 gnarly, and it is going to when it hits, it is going to hit like a truck going like 15 miles an hour between you and a big brick wall, but it's like a semi truck and it's not stopping. It's definitely not all at once, but it's fast enough that you notice and slow enough that you'd think it's not so bad at first, and then it starts crushing you, and it's like, oh dear. This could get unless like the situation is resolved relatively quickly, and then additionally the United States is willing to pull out huge portions of our oil reserves to resolve this and kick up a whole bunch of new stuff in the US. Like this is yeah. If you've ever
That's
played
right.
the video game Satisfactory, you know exactly what it's like for some basic product to shut off because you don't realize just how much of your factory it is going to shut down and potentially like having played the game. If you've played the game, I'm sure you've experienced at least one situation where you realized like because one thing was not being produced, some very fundamental thing, you literally are soft locked. You cannot get everything spun back up again. Like I don't think we're gonna hit a point like that in the real world, but I think we're gonna get like really upsettingly close.
Oh yeah, and that's only half the equation. We're talking about products here. That's not including people need to get paid this stuff. I have a note here. The
Hmm.
with high if higher energy prices quote get into wages unquote, where work this is where workers demand higher pay to compensate for the cost of living. It can spike core inflation and lead to stagflation, which is rising inflation while rising unemployment. See, like the Federal Reserve operates under a dual mandate to pursue maximum employment and price stability. Now, we say maximum employment. That's not that's not zero unemployment. Just maximum employment. That means like the maximum amount we can have where everything's being met and then some extra. But besides the point, uh, oil shocks will pit the whole unemployment and price stability against each other because companies now have to determine if they A want to raise your prices, inflation, or B start cutting employees to essentially subsidize how much they now have to spend because of you know current event situations. If the Fed cuts rates to support a sagging inflation, addressing the employment mandate, it risks exacerbating the inflation problem. Alternatively, if it keeps rates high or tightens policy to quote crush inflation, it may worsen stagflation, causing bankruptcies and business failures. As a quote, I don't know how to put this besides uh, getting I don't want to say getting rid of the weak, but those who can't survive. So by that I mean like kind of like with the dot-com bubble. Uh, bunch of businesses that probably shouldn't have been solely websites were websites. Dot-com bubble crashed. We still use websites, but the ones that survived are the ones that we kind of still use today. I don't go to the 4 websites I made back in 2000, but I still go to Facebook. I still go to YouTube. Uh, I go to Reddit. You know, websites have been around, but the weak ones, the ones that couldn't survive the crash, they're gone. They're not around. You don't use them. I don't use them. So that might we might experience that is the fact that if the strait stays closed, we don't dip into our reserves. We don't. I don't know what's going on in Venezuela because apparently it's the largest oil reserve in the world. But that, based on what I've seen, that hasn't changed anything. We have a bunch of countries now flooding to the U.S. for our oil. Well, guess what? If other countries are getting that oil, guess who's not getting that oil? And ain't us. Our oil price ain't going down. So now we have a bunch of corporate. Now again, I don't want to say weak, but yeah, small businesses can only handle so much stress before they crush. And if they crush, that might be a small town's grocery store. That might be a handful of employees. Guess what? Now unemployment goes up, and then you got more people complaining, and now the fight for jobs in the market increases because well, it gets exponentially harder because now you have more competition. More competition for people trying to get hired means wages go up slower because the company doesn't have to be like, oh, we could go, there's 99 other people that will fit your role and will probably take a lesser pay than you. You know what I mean? But that's kind of a mean approach
Yeah.
to it. I might have, because you brought up, what was it from 1970s? Uh, you
Oh,
brought up,
the oil embargo.
oh yeah. Uh, So I saw that I have a note here. It says history provides a warning. The quote great inflation unquote of the 1970s is often attributed to quote monetary policy neglect, where the Fed placed too much weight on maintaining full employment and failed to understand what its easy money policies were fueling inflation. So that might have something to do with it because it did say the great inflation of 1970s, but and the point you said in the beginning is like my final note. So I guess we come full circle here. There is a well-known lag between the Federal Reserve's action and its effect on spending. It often takes 6 to 8 quarters of full impact for the full impact of an interest rate change to manifest. So not only are you're going to get a delayed effect because of the way the energy production works with the closing the Strait of Hormuz, but the Fed, they stated here, they're not really going to be like, oh, we're going to cut rates now because we anticipate in the future. They're not going to do that. They're going to wait till it hits, and then they're going to make their decision. And who knows where it could lead for there. So you got 6 to 8 quarters. Well, maybe not quarters. You probably got 6 to 8 months before we start to feel the full effect of the oil crisis now, and then essentially a year and a half to 2 years before whatever choice the Fed makes to combat this issue, and assuming there's no more conflicts within the next year and a half to 2 years after that, then things might start to get better. I I wouldn't put any stock. I wouldn't make a call sheet bet on it getting better, but it's your money. This is not financial advice. But yeah, but speaking of 2000, we have COVID. It's been a while. COVID era homeowners are still hanging on to ultra low rate mortgages. It's been 4 years since the sub 4% mortgages were commonplace, but the homeowners who got them back then are determined to hold on to them today. More than half of all outstanding mortgages still carried rates below 4% at the end of the year, according to Realtor.com, a testament to how few borrowers with rate deals are willing to move or pay off their homes early now that mortgage rates are far higher. The reluctance to move and give up a below market mortgage rate is known as the quote lock in effect unquote and has profound effects on the housing market, contributing to 3 straight years of home sales near multi-decade lows. Few sellers means prospective buyers have little inventory to choose from, and that low supply has driven up home prices. Supply and demand. We talk about that all the time. Quote, the COVID cohort is holding steady as their rates are too low and their equity too substantial to motivate a move, and a new and new entrants are trickling in slowly, unquote, the report said, adding that it would likely take a substantial drop in mortgage rates from today's levels, around 6.4%, to, quote, unlock meaningful seller activity, unquote. The shareholders with sub 4% rates peaked at 65% of the market in 2022. Years later, the number has only gradually trickled down thanks to lock-in homeowners and interest rate home buy downs, offering an incentive to some buyers of new construction homes. Relatively small differences in mortgage rates can translate to big changes in monthly payments. The buyer who puts 20 down on a $400,000 home would pay $1,528 in principal and interest monthly with only 4% mortgage. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit my microphone. And interest monthly with a 4% mortgage. But at 6%, that monthly payment turns into $1,919. On average, a typical homeowner's monthly payment costs between payment crossed 2,000 for the first time last year, according to a report, a reflection of new buyers who have taken higher rates. Just under 22% of mortgages have a rate below 6%. That share is up from 18% from the end of 2024 and now sits at highest level in a decade. In theory, rate locks pressure should gradually ease as more homeowners need to move during life events, making mortgages rates north of 6% more common, but it's not clear if that will happen this spring, especially because mortgage rates have risen in recent weeks in response to the Iran war. Okay, cool. So now, I'm not saying socialism, but kind of close. So we talk about with the socialism. We talk about how we talk about what's called rent ceilings. You cannot charge more than this for rent. I'm not saying we have that here, but it's kind of close. One of the problems that I think with San Francisco had, I want to say the 1920s or 1940s, because they did have rent ceilings where they couldn't charge more than a certain amount for rent, is that nobody moved. Because why would you? The rate is too good. And if you went from where you're at now to somewhere better, you took a huge risk in essentially paying more. They stated here, a lot of these mortgages were taken up at below 4%. Keep in mind, this is below 4%. The examples they provided are at 4%. If I'm mistaken, I have the number somewhere. We had like near zero, like during like 2020, 2021. So, but the example they provided is that now same 20% down, $400,000 house, 4% mortgage was $1,500 essentially. 2% higher, 6%. That's almost $2,000.
Yep.
I'm not blaming these people for buying homes, but why would you do that? Why would you risk paying more money for maybe not
What
that
you
much of an
already
upgrade?
have.
Yeah, what you already have. There's no need to give it up, especially for that low of a rate. Now, I'm not screaming socialism, because it's not, but it's kind of close. It brings up the same example, is that there's no incentive. And on top of that, first home buyer stuff, I do know they get some extras, but whatever. Got some notes here. The usual. During the COVID-19 era, the Federal Reserve initiated massive quantitative easing and maintaining, zero interest rate policies. ZERP. I have that in parentheses. Which pushed mortgage rates to ZERP. Kind of reminds me of like that one villain from Buzz Lightyear. Is that Zorg? Whatever. Zerg, yeah, which pushed mortgage rates to historic lows. These low rates made it significantly easier for people to borrow money to purchase homes, which increased competition and pushed housing prices higher. Another thing, low rates, you have a bunch more people wanting to buy homes. High demand, same amount of supply, because it takes a while to build a house. Same amount of supply. Well, higher demand, slowly increasing supply. Higher demand, supply, price goes up. Basic economics there. Homeowners are currently, quote, hanging on to these mortgages, unquote, because inflation acts as a mechanism that rewards debtors by eroding the real value of their debt over time. Since real interest rates are nominal rates minus the rate of inflation, those ultra low fixed rates may effectively be paying negative real rates, protecting their wealth from, quote, secret confiscation, quote, by the government. Great, yeah, you're paying $1,500 a month instead of $2,000. That's like, because, how do I put this? Let's say by the end you pay off your home, and it takes you 20 years, the average 20 to 30 years, your $400,000 home just jumped to $600,000. We'll just say that. That's less money, essentially, you had to put into your home to pay it off for the same price. Well, you both paid the same price for the home, but the person paying 6% essentially had to pay nearly, 30% more for
Yep.
for the home to also reach $600,000. It's all paid off. It's all the same loan, but their what's it called their beginning home value was the same. Their ending home value is the same, but one of them had to pay a lot more to get there.
Yep.
Why would you do that? Sure, fine. Well, sure, fine. Next one. This dynamic creates a lock-in effect similar to rent control. Ha! Look at that. Where individuals stay in their current situation to avoid high costs of the open market, thereby reducing housing turnover. Yep. However, this creates a, quote, sticky housing market, unquote, where resources do not flow to their most valued uses because the financial incentive to move are outweighed by the cost of losing an ultra-low rate. Lenders may even face operating losses in this environment, as the interest must be paid on deposits. Sorry, as the interest rates they must pay on deposits can rise above cash flows they receive from. Okay, that's more about like if you're renting. That's a bad note.
Hmm.
You're not. I'm assuming people listening, most of you are buying homes to live in and not rent out. But even if you are, that's still something to consider. Is that inflation goes up, but mortgages locked in 4%. Sorry, they're now whatever. Forget that. We're already going through a housing crisis, and I bring this up all the time with what's it called, with my boss at work, because we shoot the stuff sometimes. Sorry, I keep hitting my microphone. We're gone for a week, and I forget it's there. I think Kamala Harris would have done a lot better job if she announced that she was willing to make, put, tell me to be fair, your tax dollars. Let's get that out of the way. Put your tax dollars into some programs to build more houses. I remember she mentioned that like the last 2 weeks before the election.
Yeah, it was the
That's a
young adult housing credit, young family housing credit,
Yeah, it's like why would you
which was
wait
it
so
was really a tax break.
Oh
So
no
it was
no
like
no
twenty
no.
six thousand dollar.
If it's first time home buyer stuff, I think I might be what you're talking about. I remember them speaking specifically, giving again your tax dollars, which they could have spun like, oh, we're just taking money for, high, or we're gonna increase millionaires and billionaires tax by like 2%, whatever. But I remember reading, not granted, this was like 2 years ago. I could be wrong. I'd be dead wrong, but it was like towards like home construction companies to build more homes, bigger incentives to like build homes. And I'm like, I remember reading that. It was like 2 weeks before the election. I'm like, I would have ran with that.
Right.
I would have been like, I don't care what Orange Man. I don't care what the Orange Man's doing. I want more homes, more supply, price, housing drops, and we'll get to that in a second. But we're just talking about the rates for right now. But what's one of the issues. You have a lot of people who have these ultra low rates. They don't want to move. Imagine being like, hey, you know how much you pay for your rent, you know how much you pay for your mortgage. We're gonna increase that by 30%, and nothing changes.
What?
Why would you do that?
Yeah, like it's this is a this actually kind of happened in not this exact thing, but sort of to your point earlier about like this being similar to like rent control, where you put a price ceiling. What it ends up doing is like it seems like a good idea maybe initially, to be like, oh hey, we'll offer you this new thing, or we'll prevent this one thing that we think is bad from happening. Think people getting evicted, right? So in order to prevent that, we're going to put in, or people getting gouged. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in rent control. So you can only charge so much for rent. And like ostensibly, it's like, oh yeah, this is a good idea. But then what it ends up doing is creating like, I've heard it referred to as like a petite gentrocracy, where like old people, like you basically build these like apartments that get like passed down from person to person to person, assuming the rent control can stay. And what that does, it mean like people just end up fighting over these like trashy homes that aren't maintained because they're horrible, but they're super cheap. And then but in a similar vein, it's like as what you said earlier. It's like, why would you ever change to get away from what you currently have when the what's on offer is just objectively worse? Like no one's going to refinance their house or go buy a new house at a rate that's higher than their own unless you're getting a significantly like meaningful upgrade. If you're going from like, a single wide to, a 2-story, 7-bedroom, 3-bath ordeal in a nice neighborhood, I mean, what's even why am I moving? What am I doing?
Oh yeah, and even more to the point, you mentioned old people. Well, let's take a small second, a small few minutes to rag on boomers. We already know they have a problem selling their homes because they think their homes are worth during COVID prices, during that huge boom. They can't sell their homes. They don't want to. They don't want to sell them at a lower rate. Yeah.
Here's some not financial advice. This is not financial advice. But if you want an interesting factoid, some people have seen some success in getting decent homes by basically buying the loan off of the person. Basically, you put no money on the house, and you just buy out their mortgage. And some people have seen some success getting some pretty nice homes for some pretty good prices, pretty good rates, because the person they're buying it from either owns multiple properties and they don't want to have to maintain all of them and the rates are getting too expensive for them, or they are moving to a different, like they're boomers, so they were retarded with money and did some stupid financing that like taking on raw isn't actually so bad. Right, so instead of being out, the down payment and whatever interest has already been paid on this, you're just out whatever principal and interest remain. Like, there have been some people who've seen some success in buying like pretty decent properties by just basically looking through the local registry and being like, all right, who's not doing so hot? Who's like, and calling the number and being like, hey, I'm interested in buying this off of you, so you do not have to deal with this headache anymore. All I want is I will buy the mortgage out from you. Like, no additional down payment. I will just buy the mortgage from you. This is not financial advice. I don't know how often this has worked, how well it will work, or the areas in the country in which it is most effective. I just know that some people have seen some success in doing this. Which, to your point, it'd be a much harder world to get something like that done, some sort of side work around done, if the alternative for that person who might be selling off their current mortgage is to get into a even worse one. So...
yeah. So, well, I guess, that's the issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't want to say that's the problem with low mortgages, but on principle, it makes sense. You don't want home prices so high that people don't want to buy homes because then it just slows down construction. But the problem with dipping into these ultra low, near zero, or even at zero rate policies is that we have situations like this. Now people don't want to upgrade because it's going to cost them at least 30% more. So think about this. You want a better house? Well, you're going to be paying more. So the house either A or B. Either A has to be significantly better to the point where you justify it. Not even A or B. It's A and B. And B, you need to get essentially almost a 30% raise at work. And based on the economy is going, I'm willing to bet that probably didn't happen. So, no one would move. No one wants to move. No one wants to buy houses. So now they're at the mercy of how fast these construction companies can build a house. And with the price of housing's going up, people aren't buying houses as fast. So now that creates like a pachinko effect where problem here, you stated earlier, a small thing here makes a big bad change over here. Now companies are like, we're not selling as many houses because we're not getting the returns on it. People don't want to pay the high price. Well, maybe instead of building 200 houses this year, we're gonna drop it to 150, maybe 100. So now we have same amount of demand, even slower increase in supply, price goes up, pachinko effect. And I think the only way to return to this is to either A, like I said, I didn't have a problem with Kamala Harris's, extra taxes to build more homes. In my mind, that makes sense, and we'll get into that in a second. Or B, you're gonna have to cut interest rates, mortgage rates, back to sub 4%. To like, when it comes to economics, you want things to grow. There needs to be an incentive. You want your corn seeds or whatever to grow. You need to give them water and space. If there's no water and space, there won't be anything to grow. Same thing with economics. But back to the point of more homes could help you out. We got here more Yahoo Finance. I love Yahoo Finance, mainly because it's free. How Austin's stunning drop in rents explains housing in America. Which, I'll be honest, I like Yahoo Finance. It's kind of sad that they needed a whole article to explain it to the common people. Because on the surface, it makes sense. More supply, normal. If supply can keep up with demand, prices stay the same, maybe even drop a little bit. But we'll get into it. Here is one narrative violation in the usual drumbeat of doom. That's a fun way to start the article. The rent in many cities across the U.S. is getting cheaper. After soaring to COVID-era highs, rents have cooled. Last month, the national median rent was down 1.7% from 1 year prior, according to research from the rental marketplace apartment list. My rent went up like $30. This made it the biggest annual decline since the company started tracking rent data in 2017. One success story stands out among all the rest: Austin, Texas, where rents dropped by a full 6% over the past year. Insert joke about everything being bigger in Texas, more than any other large metro area in the U.S. The Austin area's median rent was $1,274. Is back to roughly where it was right before the pandemic, which means that in 2026 dollars, it's significantly cheaper than it was in 2019. For the past decade, Austin has been a standard bearer for the YMBY, yes, in my backyard. Okay. Movement, passing a barrage of policy changes to make it easier to build new housing, especially new apartment buildings, according to a recent report from the Pew Charitable Trust Housing Policy Initiative. These are wacky names. That makes sense, I guess. These reforms are responsible in large part for the sharp drop in rents enjoyed by Austinians over the last several years. Housing economics overwhelmingly agree that to bring home prices down, cities need to embrace supply-side reforms that cut away the thickest of regulations that make it oddly difficult to do something as seemingly simple as build an apartment building. An argument that I don't care what you had to say. But housing markets are enormously complicated and shaped by many factors. It's challenging for researchers to measure the exact effect of policies like those rolled out in Austin. What? You just said it was doing good. Pew's report certainly provided strong suggestive evidence that the city's policy reforms made a real difference. But remember that since around 2022, rents have been falling nationwide too, and in many other cities quite substantially. So it seems likely that at least some of Austin's rent decline would have happened anyway, even without full suite of YIMBY reforms. Okay, that seems slightly disingenuous. It's like, yeah, they're dropping across the United States, but in Austin, it's going down substantially because of this policy. But it probably wouldn't. No, If you agreed, why would you go back on it? How do we isolate the impacts of reforms meant to increase housing supply, figure out which ones worked and to what extent they worked? Those questions housing experts are taking up right now, and they're not merely academic ones. Getting right Getting them right is how we will claw our way out of a housing affordability crisis almost no one doubts exists, even as some disagree over how to solve it. There's no disagreement. Build more houses. They just went on to say that Austin, Texas, has significantly less. Stop showing me ads. Thank you. Where is it? I'm looking for it. They're talking about like supply side. We've talked about that before. Initiatives reform past several years. Yeah, to bring housing prices down, cities need to embrace supply side reforms that cut away the thicket of regulations and make it utterly difficult to you know what I mean. So there's one, cutting regulations. How do I put this? I'm not opposed entirely to regulations because I like buildings to be up to code for sure, but
I like to live. I don't like to breathe asbestos.
for sure, I'll say that. But again, like
I like
they're
having fire escapes. Although what I don't like is the lack of personal-sized elevators due to fire regulation and EMS regulation. Fuck those
mm,
guys. Die on the third floor like a man. Die on the ninth floor like an adult. Come on.
exactly, dude. Be a man, but it's simple. At least in my mind, we've been talking about it. It's basic economics. Demand, supply, increase supply, price goes down, or at least maintains the same price, which should be the
Yep.
goal. And it's not like we're desperate to find land in the United States. I'm reading a statistic. Now, granted, the statistic was like 10, 15 years ago. You could take everyone in the world, put them shoulder to shoulder, they'll fit into Texas.
Yep.
So,
It's the issue with the housing stuff is like you would think in like a natural market that like you know people would buy houses and build houses and they're like we'd build more to meet more demand as people have kids and people want to start on their own and all this other stuff. When you look at okay, so why is that not happening? You have to go. It's like okay, well clearly there isn't. Maybe it's an economic reason. You look and you look and you look and there isn't one. Just no economic wouldn't have more houses except for one. Asset, what's it called? It's asset, like interest on investment, right?
yeah.
And it's like, oh, if you stop looking at a house as a consumable that you use to live somewhere, but instead you start looking at it as a asset, as an asset that can increase in value based on how limited or available or unlimited the supply of that particular asset may be. And then we realize that land is actually not all created equal, and that the Florida coast or the California coast or specific areas on rivers or whatever are actually way cooler and more desirable than the middle of the boonies, Missouri, or Nevada anywhere, or like something like that. You start to go, oh, and then it all clicks because when you look, it's exactly what's happening is people with homes in the cool areas where there are cities or where there's like nice environments, like good weather, have gone, if everyone wants to be here and we don't build any more houses, the price of our houses will skyrocket and we can pocket all that dough. And that's what as deep as that process goes. You don't ever think about, wait a minute, who's buying it then? Right? Like if people can't get houses, then they can't start out on their own. They're less likely to be upwardly mobile. And if you're guarding all the areas with the highest upward mobility, which tend to be cities and like coastal areas, then it seems unlikely that young people are going to be able to make the kind of money that would allow them. They would see the economic opportunity that would allow them to make the kind of money that would then permit them to buy those homes. They never thought that far. It was literally just boomers going, "Oh, number go up. Oh, make sure number never go down." And then that's how we ended up where we are. And in Texas, the very capitalist state that it is came in and went, no, go fuck yourself. We like free markets and we don't like stupid HOA regulations and zoning codes and all this other nonsense. Build what you want, where you want, as long as it's up to code, have at it. And hey, guess what? As soon as they did that, rent prices started leveling and then started going down. It's cheaper to live in Austin now than it was 4 years ago, which is stunning because that's true in basically nowhere else in America.
No. It's not even
Like,
that. Like it states in the article, it is cheaper to live in Austin, Texas now than in 2019. That is before
before
2020,
COVID.
and I don't have it up, but not granted. I will admit I've admitted this before. I lean like center right, but I remember there was a left wing news outlet. One, I think it was either CNN or CBS or MSNBC, one of them. But they stated it's like 2019 that, like, now granted this is news sites. This is back when, I guess you could still say it now, but they hated Trump, they hated conservatives, but they even stated 2019 the best when it comes to the economy. It was the best numbers of our lives, and those are like the news anchors like 40 and 50 years old. Best numbers of our lives, and something to compare like the best numbers since the Great Depression. All the good times they had in the 40s and 50s that start to decline, and the problems in the 70s to 90s and 2000s. We're hitting those high numbers again. In 2019, considered a great economic time for the United States. It is cheaper to live in Austin, Texas now. 6 years after COVID, 6 years after we just talked about earlier, the super low interest rates. So now people don't want to buy homes. People don't want to sell their homes. People don't want to sell their homes. Prices go up.
Yep.
Austin, Texas, they've quote unquote figured it out. Huh? If we build more houses, prices go down. And on top of that, where's my note here? I was just looking at it. Yeah, by successfully turning inputs, land, labor, capital, into massive outputs of $120,000 homes. Sorry, not dollar homes. Into a massive output of 120,000 homes, the city improved the efficiency of production, which efficiency of production, more homes. You get to go home to a home you bought, or you don't want to buy a home, you go rent. Your rent's cheaper. What happens when your rent's cheaper? Most of us aren't saving. We're probably just gonna buy the new iPhones. We're gonna buy the Steam machines, which are gonna be more expensive because the chip shortage. But you can buy all these more stuff. If you're gluttonous, I'm not trying to be mean. If you're gluttonous for food, you can buy more food because all that money now it's cheaper to live here in Austin, Texas. It's cheaper, so you can buy more of it. What does that translate to? That translates to a higher standard of living for all of the residents. You can have more stuff. You can. I say you probably
Yeah.
won't save it. You might
It's
save it for a lavish vacation.
well, it's just your classic. This is not a zero sum game. Like a good deal is not one in which um, one party has scammed the other. A good deal is one in which both parties have come out of it better than they
Yeah.
were before. Like this is like, and it's the reason why like you see, even though like ostensibly you see like a lot of people on the left who would like normally believe in like progress and providing something for everyone. When it comes to like the case of housing, it's this sort of like weird inverse thing where like they want rent controls and they want all this other stuff. Where it's like, because the native belief is that this is a zero sum game. Someone wins, someone loses. And we just have to stop the lose condition from occurring, right? We need to force the people who are winning to stop winning. That way the people who are losing can stop losing. But that's like a zero sum mindset. And people, it's easy to get stuck in those, but people get stuck in them. And it's like, especially if you don't understand like the subject matter or whatever, but like a good deal, a good economic proposition is one in which every party leaves better than they were before. You didn't go buy a car because you thought that that car was equivalently as valuable to you as the say $10,000, but because it was more valuable to you than the $10,000. Otherwise, you wouldn't have given the $10,000. You're making a lateral, or it's entirely random that you would have chosen to give up that $10,000. You're making a lateral move, and in fact, you're kind of losing because you're $10,000, it required effort from you, right? So you're actually down something because you made the effort to make a change. So you've lost energy now. You've expended energy to end up no better than you were before. You bought the car because you thought the car was worth more to you than $10,000. You wouldn't have paid more than $10,000, but it was worth more to you. That's the point of a fair trade. It's like, all right, what I am losing is the amount I'm comfortable giving up to gain what I might potentially gain. That is not the same as this is what this thing is worth. In a perfect parity. Like you're not in your head, whether you realize it or not, you're not going, this thing is perfectly in parity. This $10,000 in this car are perfectly equal. You're going, actually, this car is slightly more valuable than this $10,000, but due to other things that might be asking for this $10,000, see a vacation, see a whole new wardrobe, see computer upgrades, see investments, see like housing remodeling, right? Like whatever it might, assuming you're in a house, whatever it might be, that $10,000 can do a lot of stuff. And if it was equivalently as valuable to you as the car, you just wouldn't spend it on the car because that takes effort. But because it's less valuable to you than the car, less so in a way that you're like, I will give this up because the benefit is worth the energy expenditure and the change and the foregoing of all these other opportunities, right? So even if it's not a conscious thought process, even if the thought process is these are perfectly equivalent, that's not actually the case. Otherwise, there's no reason why you would have done it. You would actually be kind of worse off because now you're giving up on the opportunity cost of a whole bunch of other stuff, and you're also giving up all that energy required to either look for the car or buy the car or do whatever. So you're actually down if you believe that the money and the car are perfectly equivalent. What you actually believe is that that car is worth the cost of the money and the cost of the energy and the cost of all the opportunities that you're giving up to use that money on something else. That's what you think the car is actually worth. So in the same vein, if we look at housing like that, when you look at it as a zero-sum game of when someone is winning, someone else is losing, you don't want to build more homes because that just makes more winners and more losers, right? You're just adding more. You're adding one winner and one loser to each pool. In reality, you can create more winners. And the guy who bought the car, to go back to the original, and the guy who bought the car, he thinks that $10,000 is worth more to him than the opportunities he could have trading that car or parting out that car or driving that car more or whatever. It's worth more to you because it's compensating you for opportunity costs. Also works in housing, right? People are missing, the issue we're having with housing is people are missing the fact that there are opportunity costs to not building houses. So that's sort of the point I was getting at, is like people don't process the opportunity costs very well. They can process sort of the value cost of like the $10,000 price tag or like the $200,000 price tag on a house. But what they're not processing is, okay, well, $200,000 over X many years versus a down payment of, let's say, $20,000, or you get an apartment and it costs you, let's say the cost of the mortgage, not the cost of the mortgage, like your average mortgage payment, right? An equivalent payment to your mortgage per month, but you don't need to invest that down payment, and that can go to a stock portfolio, that could go towards vacation, that could go towards a new car, that could go towards a whole bunch of other stuff. You're saying the house is worth more to me than all that, and that's why people want to move places, because that's why coastal cities are so economically fecund, or just all this other stuff, because when you're building a house, right? If you're someone who's building a house, you're going, okay, is it the materials of this house and is the cost of building this house worth more than me? Let's say you're like your construction company. Is it worth more than doing other construction projects, whether it's building a bridge, whether that's building industrial stuff? Is it worth my time and my effort and my money to build a house that I don't know if it will or will not sell, assuming this is how it's done, or to take a contract to build houses if I don't think that I will be, or a company who's potentially hiring that company. Do I want to build these houses that I could potentially sell out to do all this other stuff, blah, 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 blah. When you start building houses, people do realize that this is a not zero-sum game. This is actually like a one-sum game or a positive-sum game where, sure, you're right. The guy who built the house might make out with like 2 times what he put in. But if you make it out with 1.x, right, he makes out with 2x is his value estimate. And if you make it out with 1.5x your value estimate, sure, he did better on that deal. but you're still also up. You didn't lose, you just also won, but maybe not quite as hard exactly. I think is what gets a lot of people is that like disparity of benefit, where one party might make 2x and you make 1.5. You're like, well, I just lost. It's like, no, you didn't lose. The 2x was not the natural return of this. 0 is the natural return, or air quotes natural return, right? Like the natural return is he is up 2x, and you are up, or you were down 1x, right? Like if you have like 2 cookies, if you have a cookie, and you give him a cookie, now you are down a cookie and he is up a cookie. You just did that for no reason, or he just took the cookie from you. He's now up a cookie and you're down a cookie. That's your zero-sum game. What's happening here is you're baking cookies with him. Right? You buy all the ingredients and you do all this other. You buy all these ingredients. He's okay. You buy me half the ingredients and I'll give you the cookie. I'll give you some cookies. So you buy half the ingredients, and he gives you half the cookies. I'm trying to come up with a good example that's a bit less complicated, but like.
Yeah, I got you.
This isn't zero sum. If I had a house is a good example. Or go back to the car example, right? The guy selling you the car, you're right. That car might have cost him $5,000 to acquire, and he's selling it to you for 10. So he's making out double. But if you're making out even 1.1x or 1.2x, right? Like, that car. Let's say it's perfect parity value for you. The value that would be in perfect parity for you would be like 12,000 or 13,000. If you pay 10 grand for that car, you're up. You're up. You might not be up as the other guy, but you're up. Which I think is where people struggle. Everyone wants to win as much as the guy across from them is winning.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I get that.
It's like sitting at the blackjack table and you see one guy hitting 21s all night, and you're like, fuck. But you still walk away after putting in 500. If you walk away with like 600 after putting in 500, and you walk away with like 6,000 after putting in 500, you'll be like, fuck. I hate that guy.
Yeah, but
big ups Texas, man. Big ups Texas.
Big ups in Texas, man, for sure. But I mean, to me, that makes sense. Just build more homes. Now, granted, you're right. They do view it as more of like an investment. Well, not they. I'm talking about like boomers, but they view their homes as investments, which I kind of get. But at the same time, no, it's a home. But I don't think the younger generation is really viewing it that way. I just think they want places to live. It's just getting hard, but Texas is figuring out, and I don't know. Maybe with prices going down around the United States. Okay. With prices going down around the United States, maybe it might be an incentive for construction companies to be like, okay, well, these people are at least, they can maybe save enough money to put a down payment on a house. But you go.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up.
I was going to say, if you're a state like Texas, this is better. This is amazing for you economically, because all the states that aren't doing this are hemorrhaging people. Hemorrhaging them. Those are all economically productive laborers. Like, maybe not all of them, but even if like 60% of them are economically productive laborers, those are economically productive laborers that are now boosting your state's economy, right? Mm-hmm. Hell, even if like 40% of them coming over are economic detractors, but 60% are economic producers, dude, you're still up, right? This is still a small win is a win, right? Like, sure, you're building these houses, you're investing state funds, and you're doing all this stuff, but your state GDP is going way up. Your cities are growing. You're producing more stuff. You're becoming a cultural center. You're attracting more and more people. It's smart. It's just smart to do this, and especially if none of your competition is doing this, like your more direct competition, like California, for example. If you're Texas and you're seeing California, you go,
no new houses, because we want to save the environment.
Or rent control.
Housing. Or we want to do rent control so that way we can't kick out, or we won't have any more unhoused neighbors.
Like, and you're going, hey guys, you could come live over here for very cheap. They'll just do it. It's because again, and they're making it out better, right? Okay, you don't get the golden kind of sucks. But you get to live in a decent state with decent services, and you're coming from California, so none of your cities are not car reliant. So you're not like losing out on like New York, which is like one of 2 walkable cities that exist in the United States.
Yeah,
You're moving over
from
to this
LA,
is also Florida's.
It's still hot.
What do you? Yeah, it's hot, it's flat, it's dry, and it takes 4 hours to get from LA to LA. Guess what, man? Austin's the same way. It's just cheaper, right? This is the opposite of the thing we were talking about earlier, where it's like, why would you pay the same to get something worse, or pay more to get the same thing? This is, you're paying less to get the same thing. It's the same economic proposition, just inverted. And it's like, of course these people are moving to these states, and of course they're, leaving these other states that aren't not interested in economic growth. I actually read, I think it was a short paper on this a while ago that talked about like how the economic crisis of the 70s and a lot of the culture from the 60s and 70s sort of led to this theory, this political and economic theory of like, instead of building more things to become more efficient and building more things and producing more things, to reduce waste and to reduce stuff, right? So instead of building a new nuclear power plant, right, investing in nuclear energy, building a new nuclear power plant, it instead focused on reducing what already existed. And this is a big political philosophy, like some not a de jure, like has an official name. Like this was sort of the prevailing political style that came out of like the 60s and 70s that leads a lot of like the policy thought process, or has led it for the past like since the 70s. What is that, like 40 years?
50.
Like the past 40, yeah, for the past 50 years, this has been the dominant thought of instead of shutting down this coal plant, we should build a nuclear plant. It's let's shut down the coal plant. It's producing too much smog. Okay, well that's just X many jobs that you just destroyed, and you have to figure out how to put those people in, blah 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 blah. It's like, okay, well we need to stop building houses because the houses aren't carbon neutral. Okay, but now you're only left with non-carbon neutral. Okay, then we need to say if you haven't made your house carbon neutral by X time, blah blah blah. It's like, okay, but couldn't this have been reasonably just as effectively solved by building
A nuclear power plant.
just flatly that is true. That's the answer to it. Literally, it's the classic Twitter flip the switch, fix everything switch. That's just nuclear power in every aspect. Like,
Oh yeah.
oh, we can't do that. We have to stop the production of this. Or you could just start the production of something more appealing and more efficient, like nuclear power. Or you could start the production of something more appealing and more efficient. Like, there are kinds of greenhousing that isn't just like uses paper mache foundation in order to reduce landfill. It's like no. But like, it's stuff like that where it's like, instead of going, hey, let's build a cool, better, more effective alternative, it's this thing that's happening right now needs to stop. Which, both of these things can be true, right? Like there's an element of this where it's like, okay, smog is kind of a problem and pollution is kind of a problem, right? There's a world in which, this is the sort of carrot and stick model where it's like you filled the world with too many sticks and there are a lot of carrots. So what are people supposed to do? And then eventually Texas came along and went, yeah, we're just gonna throw out a couple carrots and see what happens. And hey, guess what? All the rabbits are happy now. Or I guess it was pigs in the carrot and stick example. Like, all the pigs are happy now. Look at them. They're winking around. They're digging around. They're having a great time. When before they were just lethargic and angry and did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wonder what changed. Maybe incentives, positive ones, are just as important. In many cases, more important than negative ones. Constantly telling people don't is not a solid long-term policy. Don't build more houses. Don't do this. Don't, you can't build a house unless it's this. We don't want XYZ kind of building around here. Dude, shut up. If you listen, I like my house in the suburbs, and if we start building mixed-use housing here, then that will destroy the character. Well, hey, guess what? it'll also probably economically boost the country to such a degree that you can move and live in a different suburb.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, long story short, Texas figured it out. We figured it out.
Texas
before
figured it
that,
out.
But they figured it out. And maybe, hopefully, the rest of the country follows. I don't know. But if you made it this far, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one.